when I learned that they were named after the guys, I was like, my first thing that I wanted to talk about was Dick Van Dyke, because that's a person I loved when I was a kid. And I was like, oh, it's somebody Van something. I was like, oh, like one of my heroes.
They actually did a collab.
He did?
No.
Oh, damn. I wish there's still time. He's still kicking. He's still going. He's still working out at the gym. Welcome back to Whyte Noise, friends. I'm so excited about our guest today. Ryan, would you like to do the honors?
Yes, I would love to introduce to everyone Liz Beecroft. Thank you for joining us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Ho is an amazing therapist, influencer, social media personality, speaker, collaborator.
If you're feeling sad about yourself one day, go to Liz's Instagram and you will find all the tools to feel better. As I have before, it's at Liz Beecroft, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you so much. You, as we were saying before, we were like, how do we properly introduce you? Because I feel like you do so many things.
I know. It's too many things sometimes, and it's overwhelming for me to even try and keep count of, honestly.
Because you are perhaps the coolest therapist I have ever seen. At least based on photos. Like when I'm watching The Sopranos right now, and my mom is a clinical psychologist,
Mm-hmm.
and like my image is usually like my mom or her, where it's like this sort of buttoned up little lady who's just like very like, hello, let me. And then I came across you, and you are so cool.
How did you end up drawing out the connection to therapy and streetwear? Like, how did this come together?
Yeah, I mean, so when I was in grad school, I was kind of approaching the point of burnout, honestly. Like, it was grad school for social work is kind of wild because you're taking classes 3 days a week or 2 days a week, and then the other 3 you're in your like practicum or internship, and you're essentially doing the job of a social worker without it getting paid. So it's also like really hard to, and then you're working a part-time job aside from that, trying to actually make some money so you can afford to pay rent and live there and go to school. So I was doing a lot of that stuff, and I was just like burnt out. And this was before I even entered the field. So I started kind of just like posting online. My husband is in the marketing world. He also does a lot of photo, video work as well. And he was kind of just like really encouraging. He's like, you need your identity to be something outside of like social work and being a therapist. So started just posting my love of sneakers. And my love of sneakers really stemmed from growing up an athlete. I was born and raised in it's called Frackville, Pennsylvania. It's like middle of nowhere, bumfuck PA, honestly. And sports are pretty much a religion. So grew up loving the Philadelphia 76ers. Allen Iverson is like, he's on like Mount Rushmore for me, for sure. And it was him. I got into wearing his sneakers, his Reebok questions and answers. And from there, it kind of expanded. I not only wanted to like be one of the best athletes on the court, but I wanted to have the best sneakers. And so then through that, it kind of led me into more of the lifestyle sneakers, which is then what I started posting online when I was in grad school. And then from there, didn't even really talk about being a therapist at that point in time on my digital platforms. But then eventually I was like, let me see if there's a way of kind of having these conversations in the sneaker community, because I was making a lot of friends who were kind of opening up to me in person about those things. And then, started kind of just sprinkling in a little bit of mental health content, and eventually it led to some pretty awesome opportunities, opened some doors, and I just kind of went headfirst and dove into it.
Yeah, how big is your street shoe collection now?
Honestly, I've downsized because I've hit that point in my life where like I'm going to be 34 this year. I'm starting to just become more intentional with the pairs that I have. There was a point in time where I was just buying so many sneakers because they were like the cool shoe to have. I wanted to just like have a shoe that I could like get a quick fit off and maybe get a repost from Hypebeast. And that was like toxic behavior. Like, honestly, I went through my own like, therapy talking about that kind of stuff. And, I've downsized a lot. So I probably have maybe like 150 pairs in my collection now. But at one point it was like 400 or more. So I've done a really good job downsizing. When we lived in Brooklyn, we had a 2-bedroom apartment, and our second bedroom was my sneaker room / like office. So
awesome.
We had like the IKEA Billy bookshelves, just like in every single wall pretty much, and stacked high, and it was just filled with sneakers.
Wow. And do you wear all of them, or some of them just like that's a special pair, like that is meant to be looked at and admired?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of wearing your shoes. Were some that I probably never put on that like maybe I got gifted or just like never got around to wearing them, but for the most part I wore pretty much all of them at least once. And there was like one pair I can remember getting gifted. It was like a Reebok Answer 5, and they did a collaboration with BBC Ice Cream, Pharrell's like one of his streetwear brands, and it was a really cool. It was like a dark red and like pink and yellow kind of colorway. And I love Post Malone. So I went to a Post Malone concert in Philly.
Uh-huh.
He sings White Iverson. I had my Iverson questions on, and we were like right up front. And then I just like shoved my sneaker at him. He's like, "This is so cool." He signed it twice. I've never worn them again. They're just kind of like
Oh no.
like
That's
prized
awesome.
possessions. Yeah.
Okay, so are they the favorite pair then?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Hands down.
That's so cool. Also, how was the concert?
Oh, amazing. He's so good live. He's just such a character. His dance moves are next level.
I wonder with like clothes and shoes, my boyfriend works in fashion and has like, I've never known someone with so much clothing, but because I have like 4 t-shirts and a pair of boots, and that's my life. So, but he's the same where he's like, no, everything should be worn. Like, even if it's a really nice, expensive fancy, like that is the reason you have it, because you should like actually enjoy it, even if just once. So the topic then is perfect for today, because it's not just sneakers, but it's one specific brand.
It's Vans sneakers.
Ooh. Funny enough, history with Vans, at one point dabbled in skating.
Ooh.
My first skateboard was a World Industries. Like, this was back 4th grade. All my friends were boys growing up and loved skateboarding. And the reason my husband and I are together, we actually met on Tinder. And in my Tinder profile, I'm only on here to find Shane O'Neill. Shane O'Neill is this like gorgeous Australian skateboarder.
Yeah.
Colin messaged me and was kind of like, "What about Corey Kennedy?" And then we just hit it off and started talking about skateboarding. And 10 years later, we're married for 3 years now. So.
Oh, well, then this is perfect.
Yeah.
Then you probably know a lot more about Vans than I do.
I was gonna say, I have the research of it, but that is about the depth of it, and I'll explain that too.
Oh, great. Now that we've chatted for a second, who would you like to go first?
How about rock, paper, scissors?
Oh, no one's done that yet. All right, Ryan, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Liz, do you want to say rock, paper, scissors,
Yep.
and then we'll go? Okay.
Okay. Rock, paper, scissors, go.
What did you do? Paper? Oh, I did rock. You beat me. Okay, Ryan, you're going first.
Okay.
Ryan, I have your timer ready to go. Let me know when you're ready, and I shall hit start.
I'm ready.
Great. And go.
So I did a little research on Vans because I wanted to know the history and how they became what they are. And thinking about shoes growing up kind of brought up a personal story for me, which I'll share at the end. But Vans shoes were created by Paul Van Doren in Anaheim, California in 1966. And it was originally called the Van Doren Rubber Company. Their novel idea was to make shoes on site and sell direct. So completely cut out the middleman. So you walked in and you figured out what you wanted and they made them and you got them, which is kind of cool. But as it turns out, the very iconic waffle bottom held a skateboard incredibly well. And as a result, was kind of ingratiated into the skating community. It also helped that they were durable construction, so like canvas and leather, and they were relatively cheap, so you could beat the shit out of them. And like the thing that I was reading is like they're parent approved because they were easy to replace. But and this is, by the way, this is kind of how things developed through the 70s for them. And then in 76, they partnered with Tony Alva and Stacy Peralta, and they created the Era, which is the low top sneaker that was padded and really kind of cemented their place in the skating community and as a skating shoe. And then I love this. Do either of you know what was behind the ascent of the slip-on, the checkered slip-on?
Authentics? No.
No.
Wait, is it the movie?
Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Sean Penn, the stoner. for them. And it's kind of cemented their place in pop culture or even like counterculture, which I thought was kind of cool. Oddly enough, I haven't seen Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I'm like, oh, I think I'm missing out.
Neither have I. And I feel like it was one of those movies that I would see at Blockbuster as a kid and be like, oh, that looks fun. And then I would just rent Clue again. So
I feel like I've failed as an elder millennial here on that one, but
yeah,
oh well.
same.
In the 80s, they like overextended themselves, so they kind of got like way into it. They started to make breakdancing shoes, which was like the thing highlighted as like, what the hell were they thinking? They ended up in bankruptcy in 84. But Paul Van Dorn was still at the helm and realized that what they needed to do is back away from this kind of like Nike strategy of rapid growth and instead get back to like the basics, get back to like where their kind of heart and soul was. So in the late 90s, they really started to lean back into action sports. They backed the Warped Tour. They built skate parks. They were a big supporter of BMX and the punk scene, and ultimately just kind of started to become synonymous with youth and rebellion, which I would say at some level they still today. And I think what's interesting about where they are today as a brand is they grew up with millennials. Like they've been a part of millennial culture in essence since we were born. And like, you know, they've collaborated with The Simpsons, Supreme, Vivienne Westwood. But now, in terms of where they are, they went public on NASDAQ in 91 and were bought up by VF. So VF owns, they now own Supreme, they own North Face, they own Timberland, and it's worth like, they bought it for like 400 million. And it now is one of their top producing brands at close to $3 billion a year. I was like, I wonder if they're still made in the United States. And that answer is absolutely not. Part of their growth strategy drove them to start getting supplies or find cheaper supplies outside of the US, but then ultimately moving most of the production out of the US was part of their survival strategy. And candidly, if they hadn't done it, the brand might not be around at all today. So it just kind of like is what it is. I do remember when VF took over Timberland. So I liked Timberlands a lot. And I still have one of my original pairs, actually, because they're well made. And Timberland was known for, it didn't matter how much you beat the shit out of them, you could return them to them and they'd send you a new pair. VF brought that to an abrupt end. Kind of unfortunate. I mean, they're still pretty supportive of I would call like iconic brands that have very loyal followings for very specific reasons, which I think is cool. And apparently they maintained the leadership for Vans. And that's why Vans continues to have the kind of authenticity that they carry. But yeah, that's kind of where they're at today. And this made me reflect on like, I'm like, why the hell were Vans, like, why didn't I wear them as a kid? Like, why wasn't this like a thing for me? And like, you know, Michael, it just like, why does it always go back to mom?
That's a better question for Liz. You literally have a therapist on the pod right now.
Like, get ready, we're gonna do some unpacking together, and I'm gonna make some money at the end of this. My copay is $45. Let me know how we file.
Whyte Noise brought to you by Ryan's Health Insurance.
But my mom would have never let me wear anything associated with streetwear, and I think it's because she was a teacher and like the whole like her impression of, I mean, it was a rebellious street brand, right? So, and her impression was rebellion, and there was no way her child was going to be rebellious. So, you know, what did this translate to for shoes for me? So my mom was hyper pragmatic and very thrifty. And, you know, my mom was one of these moms that was like, oh, I would never spend $50 on a pair of shoes. You don't need $50 shoes. What? Like, just ridiculous. So my mom goes to Kmart, finds these incredible shoes known as Jordache Street Legends, which were really kind of a replica of a Nike basketball shoe that were solid leather. That was it. They were, Ryan, they're solid leather. They're well made. They're solid leather. So I had to wear these Street Legends. I wore these Street Legends for probably 3 consecutive years. And like, I was kind of an awkward kid to start with at the end of the day, like didn't really know who I was not connected with like my sexuality at that point. Like, why am I so weird and different? And then on top of it all, I'm wearing these shoes that just made me feel that much more like out. But my mom, for my mom, that wasn't like, this is the pragmatic, like, why would anyone care? They look good. They're made of leather.
I don't know. I'm picturing little brown hooves made out of leather.
They were, I actually went and looked them up, and there is a little bit of like information on them. Essentially, they were a byproduct of Jordash's like rapid expansion with Kmart, where Jordache was just slapping their brand on everything, which is unfortunate because I mean, they were kind of like the hot jean to have through the 80s. And I guess when that kind of like wound down, they were like, how do we keep making money? And they're like, yeah, put our name on everything in Kmart. And they were a blue light special. I want to say my mom got me like 5 pairs of them. There were ultimately like 2 pairs that I never wore ever because I just refused. But this whole thing came to an end, I want to say my sophomore year in high school. And I'm going to gamble it was like at a Ross. Do you guys know Dress for Less? Ross?
Oh, Ross Dress for Less. Of
Yeah.
course.
And I found a pair of Nike Air Max or Air Turf Max Dan Marinos. And they were probably like, they were slightly out of date. Like they were obviously what remained in some sort of stock, but I was so excited to find them. And I remember like taking them to my mom and being like, and it's funny, I had my own money. I'm almost done.
That was your 10 minutes. You can finish your story though. Again, rules.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. We're kind of doing rebellion, right? That's the theme.
There you go.
So my mom, like, even though I had my own money, my mom would still kind of approve what I would purchase. And like, so I had to like convince, and I was like, look, mom, these were originally $65 shoes. They're down to $30 now. And I got the approval to wear them. I was so proud of those damn high tops. Like, I remember I wore them to school. One of the first times I wore them to school, like one of the guys that now, as I reflect on it, I think I was attracted to, complimented them. And I was just like, I was like, I knew these shoes were amazing. And I wore the shit out of them. I wore the soles off of them, but I maintained them. Like if they got the least little bit dirty, I cleaned them. If I got scratches in the white leather, I cleaned up the white leather. Off of this, I was so intrigued by it. And I'm currently trying to negotiate with somebody on eBay to buy a pair of them right now. So,
That's really cool.
So like in terms of therapy and like shoes, and like, obviously I just went through some brain damage. Do you ever clock people on their shoes when they walk in? Do you ever like look at shoes and go and kind of go like, oh, those shoes are a lot of fun. I bet you this person's fun, or like something like that?
Sometimes it's also a really good way to engage a client, and it throws people off guard, especially like if they're not like, they don't know that I know sneakers like that. There's times where I'll have a session, we spend 15 minutes just talking about sneakers or whatever, because the person's just anti-therapy, or because their coach or, someone in their life is kind of like pressuring them into this and they don't want any part of it. So it's more of a strategy of just like, okay, like, let's talk about what you're comfortable with for now. And, let me show you that, like, I'm also a human. And when you're ready to have, the harder conversations, we can cross that bridge, but we don't need to do it right now. But it's funny sometimes too, like if I have sneakers on, like I'll get clocked by like a client. And being that I am such a diehard Phillies fan, I do have clients that like work for different teams in the MLB. I always have to be very cognizant of like what I'm wearing in sessions. I can't be wearing a Phillies hat with, someone from, a different team.
And you're like, no, how does it make you feel thinking about how I feel about it?
Are you ready, Michael?
I think so.
All right, ready, set, go.
So it's funny, before I even start, when you were like clocking somebody by their shoes and like the type of shoes you liked when you were a kid, I loved penny loafers. And now I'm just like, what did that say about me?
Not surprising.
And why does this still feel so correct? I feel like I grew up from like a penny loafer kid who had a brief moment with Converse where I was like, I'm going to have every color Converse, where I was like, my moment of fun. And then I just accepted who I am, which is Sperry's and Birkenstocks. And like, there we are. Vans. That actually is when I first, when we were signed Vans, my first thought was just like a flashback to being at the mall in high school and very much realizing and accepting that I was not a cool kid. Which is fine. Like, it makes me think of like the Spencer's Gifts and like Off the Wall and like Journey, like
Journey.
Yeah.
and the town where I grew up, like the mall was very much like a social center. We very much were like one of those 90s movies where it was cold, it was always snowing, there wasn't much to do, but we had a huge mall. And so you would just go hang out there. And I always liked Vans because I thought the patterns and stuff were really fun. They looked comfortable. I think I may have had one pair at some point in college when I had a moment of like, I'm cool. And, you know, so that was my first thought with Vans, was just like this feeling of like inferiority, but then sort of acceptance. Where I ended up, because I was like, okay, let me actually learn about Vans. Also, quick side note, again, welcome to my ADD brain. When I learned that they were named after the guys, I was like, my first thing that I wanted to talk about was Dick Van Dyke, because that's a person I loved when I was a kid. And I was like, oh, it's somebody Van something. I was like, oh, like one of my heroes.
They actually did a collab.
He did?
No.
Oh, damn. I wish. There's still time. He's still kicking. He's still going. He's still working out at the gym. Vans might be good for leg day. I don't know. They're flat.
It's true, actually. Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
There you go. But so I learned a little bit about them, but where I ended up was on the Damn Daniel video, which I don't know if you remember. Clearly, Liz, you remember this.
With the white van.
Damn, Daniel. Damn, Daniel. Spicy with the white fans. Which why they were spicy, we're not sure. So this was such a joy for me to learn about this because I remember when everyone was saying like, damn, Daniel. And I lived under a rock, so I had no idea what any of this meant. And I was one of those people who said, like, damn, Daniel, having no clue what I was referencing.
Was it Vine? Was that from Vine when, like,
so.
Yup. It
Okay,
became,
I was like,
started
Vine,
on
yeah.
Snapchat,
Oh.
moved to Vine and YouTube and Facebook with over 400 million views.
Oh my.
Wow.
And those guys, it was Daniel Lara, who's the damn Daniel, and then Joshua Holtz was the buddy who said it. Were named two of the most influential people on the internet in 2016 by Time Magazine. And it's again, like, it came back to like this parallel thing of like inferiority then acceptance, where like I had my little like 15 minutes of social media fame during COVID, where I did Moira Rose impressions. And so within the Schitt's Creek community, I was like, but before that, the irony was I had friends who were like, you can barely turn your phone on, let alone know how social media works. Like, you don't know about trends. I was like, yeah, but I got a wig and I can do weird voices. And so it was no shock to me that I had heard of this, but had no clue who these two were. But it was just fascinating learning about them. Like, I watched, they went on Ellen after this happened, and they had this great Ellen interview where she's like, so, and they're like, I don't know, we're 14, and the one kid is a swimmer, and he was just like, yeah, I think I knew we were famous when I went to a swim meet, and like 10 people asked me to take my picture with them. And it's just so sort of like sweet to watch like influencers before influencers were
Yeah.
a thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Or it was like a career.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's interesting to think about if that had happened to those kids now, because they did it purely on accident. And it's so sort of sweet to watch them. And I even tried to find what's happened to them since, and no one really knows what happened to Daniel. He stopped posting on social media. Joshua, I think, is like a filmmaker now and like kind of photographer. Seems, and again, I think they're only like 24 now, so they only but it's interesting because like if they had done that now, they'd probably be in like starring in a Ryan Murphy series or like have their own line. And it's like it kind of stopped right there, which was like the sweet innocent moment of like pre-influencers. But they seem like sweet kids. It was interesting, like looking into their reactions to fame and like Daniel, like I love that he got a lifetime supply of Vans which I think wasn't really a lifetime supply, but it was just like a whole bunch of vans. And I didn't realize they gave them all to him at once.
They probably also like get dry rotted over time, I would assume, if you don't wear them.
And they all wear the white van, that he wears. So very sweetly, he gave them almost all of them to like kids at a hospital.
Loma University Children's Hospital.
There you go. Yeah, see,
I had to look it up. I was like, I gotta do it.
Which just seems so lovely. And then poor Joshua, though, so then he got a surfboard from Ellen, which he was a big surfer, so awesome. But he got swatted, which I did not know this term.
I don't know.
To get swatted. So apparently this is right after it happened. Like right after they were on Ellen and they like really, really blew up. And they're going to award shows and stuff like this. So to get swatted is when somebody calls in a fake 911 call, and it's something so seemingly serious that SWAT teams are sent to you. And it's called getting swatted. And somebody did this to this poor 14-year-old kid, or I think he was 15, Joshua Holtz. Somebody called into 911 that his mother had been shot and there was an armed attacker in their home. And so they were just like chilling at home, and then a full SWAT team just like blew into their house, like guns drawn, like looking for the armed attacker.
Oh my God, that's so traumatic.
Right? And it seems like no surprise that after that, they both sort of went a little radio silent as far as social media. And again, like nobody really knows what happened to Damn Daniel. And after this poor like SWAT incident. And that's what, I mean, even as a therapist, it must be interesting to be like, what would that do to you? And they like skyrocketed to fame before we knew what influencers were. Like,
and not having any of the tools or resources that you have now to like take advantage of to help you through that.
Yeah. Or like, I think a lot of times, like now there are like teams who swoop in that's like, I'm a manager for influencers, I'm a PR person, and they sort of like help you handle it and navigate it. Whereas there you were just sort of like thrown to the internet wolves. And the trolls, I could only imagine what these two poor kids went through. Because the one kid with Daniel, apparently he was getting proposals from like fully grown women and he was 14. Like, anyway. So yeah, that's what it just brought me back to like, damn, Daniel, with that weird little voice. But yeah, I don't know how much time I have left, but that's what it made me think of.
Minute 20.
Oh, a minute 20. Okay, well then since we have some bonus time, we're just gonna riff for a quick second. What this won't have anything to do with vans, but then Damn Daniel now makes me think like, what was sort of your first like viral thing that you remember? Like, not that you did, but like that you were like, oh, that was awesome.
Okay, this is bad. Remember Ed Bassmaster?
No, what's that?
So like, this is like, I guess I was in college, but he was this guy and he was on YouTube and he would just like prank call people. And so he would like dress up and film himself prank calling places. But like he called like a nail, like in hindsight, it's probably like now he would probably get canceled for a lot of the things that he did. But in hindsight, he like called in a nail salon and he was like, I came in last week and I got a pedicure and you told me I had man toes. And like, he was never there. He never got the pedicure. And then the woman, like this poor like Asian woman who's just like, no, I asked you if you wanted Mentos, and like was trying to like cover up something that never happened. And it was just like this whole thing. So like I would go around with my friends in college and be like, he said I had Mentos. And then he also like would just go out in public and like just like have someone would be videoing him, and he would just kind of act as this like, he had a bunch of different characters, and he would go up to people like walking their dogs, and it was like this lady walking and he's like, what is that, a pony? And she's like, no, it's a greyhound. And like he would just like fuck with people and like he would record it and put it on YouTube, and it was like funny. And that was like one of the first things I guess I can remember was like that.
For me, the advent of all of this actually kind of precipitated on email. So like in college, my first few years in college was when people just had started bringing, it was like a mandatory requirement to have a computer. And so we all had computers, and people would distribute pretty awful videos across listservs. for various classes. And I remember this one guy in one of my classes sent a very interesting movie with a horse, and it was in our communications class. And I just remember walking into class that day, and I love that professor. And he was just like, I think the guy's name was Tony. He's like, well, Tony, thanks for distributing that content out to everyone. And like everyone just kind of laughed. I didn't know what to say because everyone, I was like, is this allowed? Like, you can do this? And then I forget who somebody I was talking to. They're like, dude, we're adults. Like,
Wow.
that's how old I am.
All right. Well, that's my Vans presentation. It went a little off the wall, but we got there. Okay, Liz. You get the fun time now of choosing our winner. Literally whatever that means to you, and there are no parameters. It's just whatever you think.
I'm going with Michael because I love the discussion on like the cultural impacts that it has and like how sneakers or, like impact social media and trends and just like the cultural impact. So yeah, that's my winner.
And vice versa, because van sales went like through the roof after the Damn Daniel.
Yeah.
The white ones.
Yeah.
I definitely bought a pair because of it. That's
nice.
I was influenced by Daniel.
You were influenced before we even really knew what was happening.
So I was gonna say, this makes me think of something. You did a fun collaboration with Nike. If you were to ask again to do a fun collaboration with Vans, where would you go with it?
I'm very intentional with my collabs especially when it comes to like mental health messaging and storytelling. Vans does a lot of really cool. They have a nonprofit that actually gives back to the mental health of like young skateboarders. I probably would do something with, the stories of any of their sponsored pros that they work with. So like trying to understand like, whether it's like having them write out like their affirmations or like, I don't know, something around like performance and mental health and like including their storytelling in it.
All right. And you have the fun job of giving us our topic for next week.
So I'm a big Disney adult. And
I saw. Yeah.
I want it to be on Club 33 at Disney.
Oh,
Club
I know
33. I don't. Wait, what is that like the secret club in the castle?
It's like a members club that all Disney properties have. And they actually just increased so there's like a 50, they just increased it. I think it's like 50 grand just to like initiation fee. And the wait list to become a member of Club 33 is like years long. They also do like extensive background and credit checks to even make sure that like you could financially become it. But like it's wild. And there's a lot of like weird, so like apparently Walt Disney was a Freemason. And then there's also some like weird stuff that is rumored that happens in Club 33. I don't know if it's true or not, but
there was some public drama in the previous 5 years. That's how I know about it. And it hit media in the previous years. I don't remember what it was, but yeah, there was something weird that went down and somebody came out and went public about it. And it was like, ooh, this is
I was
fun.
going to say, because I'm not surprised when you said Freemason, because it was kind of giving like the little Freemasony vibes. Okay, cool. I'm excited because I know next to nothing about this. So this is gonna be fun to loosely research. All right. So where should people follow you, find you, where all the things?
Yeah. So my personal Instagram is Liz, the letter B, and then Croft. That is where you can find me as a human and my life outside and behind the scenes of being a therapist. And then if you want like the mental health content, my private practice is Mental Sesh, MENTL.SESH. And that's where you're going to get more of the mental health content is. But honestly, like I love just my own platform because honestly, when I'm done work, the last thing I want to do is create content around mental health for the day. So
fair.
Yeah.
That's totally fair. So chat about cool sneakers and Disney and pretzels and Phillies.
Yes. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. This was so fun.
Oh, good. Yay.